Last time that we were talking about things, we talked about the Seppo Rebellion. And in the Seppo Rebellion, we talked about how the Seppos were rebelling because there was a rumor going around about how their cartridges for their rifles were sealed with beef and pork fat. And as we discussed, Hindus are vegetarians and Muslims don't eat pork. And therefore, when they had to bite into the corner of this cartridge to rip it off and then get the bullets that were inside, they believed that they were violating their religions, and that led to a rebellion. In that rebellion, eventually it is stopped when the British government gets directly involved by sending troops to India to put down the rebellion. And the British government takes over direct control of India in 1858. So, for British rule in India, there are a couple positives. So, we're going to talk about a couple positives. So, we already talked about some of the negatives and so forth, losing independence of their country and being exploited for cheap goods. But what were some positives of British imperialism in India? Let's go ahead and make a bullet and let's write down the word positives. So bullet and write down the word positives. The first of the positives, number 1, so make a 1, and write down public health improved. So the first of the positives was that public health improved. If you see over here in the picture, in the right-hand side, that's a sewer system. So public health improving is making the sewer systems that started to go through the larger cities in India that provided better health sanitation, provided clean water, and such. And clean water is important. There's a story from in Britain. And in the story in Britain, what was happening was that in London, people were getting sick. And there was a doctor, and this doctor was pretty sure the reason people were getting sick was because they were drinking filthy water. There was other doctors like, no, it's just caused by this like a cloud that's moving around. And he's like, no, it's not being caused by like a cloud. It's being caused by dirty water. So you had the river Thames running through London, so you got the river and it's running through here. And there were two water stations. So two water stations that were pumping out water. One was pumping water out from River Thames here and delivering it to the city. And the other one was down here pumping out water to the city. Now, everyone who was getting water from this pumping station wasn't sick. Everybody who was getting water from this pumping station were getting sick. So what was happening? Well, the place that the dump off of sewage from town, so when they had the sewer system going, obviously that sewer system has to drain out somewhere. Where that sewer system was coming out at was right here. So it was coming out right here and then going down river and then getting back into the water system. So everyone who was getting water from here was drinking contaminated water from the sewage, while everyone who was getting water from here was getting fresh water. And that's what was causing people to get sick. So, funny story, you drink sewer water, you're going to get sick. All right. So that's from a story from in London. Okay. So that was their sewer system and their problem that they were having. And cholera was kind of spreading through and so forth and was causing some issues. Yeah. So, hey, you got to make sure people get fresh water. So not only are you pumping sewage out, but you also got to make sure that sewer water is not where people are then going to, drink from that same water. Number 2, literacy rates improved. So number 2, literacy rates improved. Now, literacy rates improved, as we talked about before, the word literate means that you can read. So if you're literate, you can read. So literacy rates improving in India was one thing of the British coming in. You'll see that these positives are very similar to the ones we talked about when we talked about sub-Saharan Africa. Number 3, railroads. Number 3, railroads. Railroads are also pretty important. It allowed the interior parts of India to be used by farmers, so that way that resources could then be shipped from the interior to the exterior of India. All right, so railroads just allowed movement of goods, also allowed movement of troops and so forth of the British, which allowed them to control kind of the large expanse of India. And four defeated the bandits. So four defeated bandits. So there were quite a bit of bandits, people that were stealing and such from other people in India. A lot of those banditry problems were kind of put down by the British government once they were kind of in control. And that was in the 1800s. Now, once we get to this point in the 1800s, we had this, Seppo Rebellion. There's still a push by people in India to start gaining their independence. Let's go ahead and make a bullet and write down Indian nationalist. So make a bullet and write down Indian nationalist. So the Indian nationalist movement starts to begin in India in kind of the late 1800s. And a lot of the reason why the Indian nationalist movement begins is make a one. Indians resented a system that made them second-class citizens in their own country. So what was happening was that the British in India were being treated better than people in India were being treated. Okay, so basically you're living in your own country, and yet you're not being treated as good as someone else who's from a different country. And they really kind of resented the system of being basically a second-class citizen in their own country. And so that's when there then calls for self-government by the early 1900s. Let's go ahead and write down this here. There we go. By the early 1900s, number two, so make it two. By the early 1900s, they were calling for self-government. So number two, by early 1900s, they were calling for self-government. And this is then going to lead into Gandhi, and with Gandhi then taking over as kind of the leader of the push for independence in India. You'll see Gandhi doing quite a lot of stuff in India before World War II. Now, he does put aside kind of pushing for independence during World War II because, Japan was trying to invade India and trying to push towards that way. So there was a stop during World War II for push for independence. But after World War II, once again, then a push for independence in India. All right, let's go ahead and stop there for today.